The shelter always felt quieter in the early afternoon. Sunlight slipped through the high windows in pale stripes, warming the concrete floor where the dogs usually slept. She moved down the aisle with practiced calm, clipboard tucked under her arm, listening to the soft rhythm of breathing, the occasional tail thump, the gentle clink of metal bowls. It was an ordinary shift. Predictable. Safe. Then the new pup stopped walking. His leash went tight in her hand. Not hard, just enough to make her look down. He wasn't pulling forward or trying to back away. He stood frozen, ears tilted, head slightly lowered, eyes fixed on the far end of the corridor. His body trembled almost imperceptibly, like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. "Come on," she whispered, smiling despite herself. He didn't move. Instead, he let out a low, uncertain whine. Not fear. Not aggression. Something closer to confusion, or recognition. His paws shifted, turning him sideways, subtly blocking her path. When she tried to step around him, he leaned back into her leg, refusing to let her pass. Her chest tightened. Dogs barked for many reasons. They froze for many reasons. But this quiet insistence made her pulse quicken. She followed his gaze. Empty hallway. Closed doors. Nothing out of place. The pup suddenly lifted his head and tilted it, as if responding to a sound carried on air alone. His tail wagged once. Slowly. Carefully. "Do you hear that?" she murmured, though she knew there was nothing to hear. The pup took one deliberate step forward. And that's when everything finally made sense. Before we continue, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching dog stories. And tell me, where are you watching from? The afternoon settled gently over the shelter. Light filtered through the high windows, pale, dusty, warm. It stretched across the concrete floors in long, quiet bands. The kind of light that made everything slow down. She moved down the main corridor with an easy rhythm. Clipboard under one arm. Keys softly chiming at her hip. This was her favorite hour of the day. Most visitors were gone. Phones were quiet. The dogs had eaten, walked, and settled into that peaceful in-between space where the world felt safe again. Some slept curled tight. Others rested with their chins on paws, eyes half open, watching her pass. She greeted them the same way every day. A soft name. A gentle nod. A pause when someone wagged a little harder than the rest. Then she reached the last kennel on the row. The new pup sat calmly inside. He wasn't large. Not small either. A young mixed breed with soft tan fur, darker along the ears and back. His eyes were deep brown, thoughtful, almost older than the rest of him. He didn't bark when he saw her. He simply stood, ears lifting, tail giving one careful sweep. "Well, hey there," she said quietly. Her voice echoed faintly off the walls. The pup tilted his head, studying her face like he was memorizing it. He'd arrived that morning. No name yet. No history anyone could confirm. Picked up wandering near an industrial block a few miles away. Clean. Healthy. A little thin but not neglected. The kind of dog that made you wonder how he'd ended up alone at all. She clipped the leash on and opened the kennel. He stepped out without hesitation. His paws tapped softly against the floor as they started down the corridor together. Their shadows stretched ahead of them, long, quiet, ordinary. She breathed in the familiar scent of disinfectant and dog shampoo. Somewhere, a radio hummed low in the office. A bowl clinked as another staff member cleaned up lunch. Everything felt normal. Then the pup slowed. Not suddenly. Not sharply. Just less forward motion. The leash tightened slightly in her hand. She glanced down, expecting distraction. A smell. A sound. But the pup wasn't pulling. He had stopped. Completely. His body was still, balanced evenly on all four paws. Ears angled forward, then slightly to the side. Listening. She followed his gaze. The hallway ahead was empty. Closed doors. Muted light. Nothing unusual. "Come on, buddy," she murmured. She gave the leash a gentle encouragement. He didn't move. His tail lowered, not tucked. Just quiet. A faint tremor moved through his shoulders. She crouched beside him, concern warming her chest. "It's okay," she whispered. The pup's chest rose and fell a little faster now. His eyes stayed fixed ahead. Then he made a sound. Not a bark. Not a growl. A low, uncertain whine soft enough that she almost missed it. Her breath caught. That sound wasn't fear. It wasn't anxiety. It was searching. She stood slowly, following the invisible line of his attention. The corridor remained unchanged. Still clean. Still quiet. She laughed under her breath, trying to shake the unease creeping in. "You're all right," she said, more for herself than him. She stepped forward. The pup leaned back. Not hard. Not panicked. Just enough to block her path. His shoulder pressed lightly against her leg. She froze. Dogs pulled forward when they wanted something, pulled back when they were scared. But this felt intentional. Her heart began to beat a little faster. She tried again, stepping to the side. The pup adjusted with her, calm but firm, keeping himself between her and the hallway. "Hey," she breathed. She knelt again, meeting his eyes. Up close, she noticed details she hadn't before. The way his ears flicked at sounds too faint for her to register. The way his nose lifted slightly, testing the air. The way his body stayed loose, ready but not tense. As if he was waiting. She listened. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. No alarms. Just the shelter breathing around them. Then the pup's head lifted. Slowly. His ears tipped back. Then forward again. His tail gave one small wag. Just once. Her skin prickled. "What is it?" she whispered. The pup shifted his weight and took a single step forward. Careful. Measured. He paused. Listened again. Then another step. The leash slid through her fingers. She didn't stop him. Something about his certainty quieted her own doubt. They moved together now, deeper into the corridor. Each step felt heavier than the last. The light ahead seemed dimmer. The air cooler. The pup slowed once more. Stopped. Lifted his head. And tilted it, just slightly, as if responding to something carried on a whisper. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew this building. Every sound. Every echo. There was nothing here that should have drawn his attention like this. And yet, the pup stood perfectly still, ears forward, eyes soft but focused. Certain. And in that quiet moment, leash slack, hallway empty, heart racing, she felt it. That unmistakable sense. That the dog was listening to something she could not hear. Something real. Something waiting. And that was when everything finally began to change. They stood there longer than felt reasonable. The hallway didn't change. The lights didn't flicker. No door opened. And yet the pup refused to relax. She loosened her grip on the leash completely. Let it fall slack between them. He didn't move forward. Didn't move back. He simply stayed. Listening. She swallowed and glanced over her shoulder. The shelter behind them was still calm. A distant bark echoed once, then faded. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, let's see." She took a slow step forward. This time the pup didn't block her. Instead, he moved with her, shoulder aligned with her knee, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body through her jeans. His ears rotated, tracking something invisible. Left. Right. Then forward again. They reached the end of the corridor where the floor changed texture. Concrete gave way to older tile, faintly cracked, cooler underfoot. The pup's pace slowed even more. His nose lifted. His breathing deepened. She noticed it then, the smell. Faint. Metallic. Not sharp, just old, like something that had been trapped without air. Her chest tightened. "This is ridiculous," she murmured. She had walked this way hundreds of times. Storage rooms. Maintenance access. Nothing unusual. But the pup's tail had stopped moving entirely. He sat. Right there in the middle of the hall. Sat straight. Alert. Eyes fixed on a door she'd never paid much attention to before. It was unmarked. Painted the same dull gray as the wall. No window. Just a handle and a narrow gap at the bottom where light didn't quite reach. "That's just storage," she said softly. The pup didn't look at her. He leaned forward slightly, weight shifting onto his front paws. A low whine slipped out again. Not louder. Just clearer. Her throat went dry. She crouched beside him, resting a hand on his chest. His heartbeat was steady. Strong. Not scared. "You're okay," she whispered. But the words felt thin in the air. She reached for the door handle. The moment her fingers brushed metal, the pup stood. Quickly. Not lunging. Not panicked. Just immediate. He placed himself between her hand and the door, and for the first time, he looked at her. His eyes weren't wide. They weren't pleading. They were intent, focused, as if he was asking her to wait. Her breath stalled. "Hey," she said under her breath. Her hand dropped away from the handle. The pup turned back toward the door, nose close to the seam at the bottom. He sniffed once, twice. Then he sat again. Right there, guarding. A chill slid down her spine. Dogs reacted to things. Smells, sounds, instincts. But this felt deliberate. Like he had chosen this spot. She stood slowly and stepped back. The pup stayed. Didn't follow. Didn't pull. He remained seated, eyes never leaving the door. She felt foolish. Then uneasy. Then something else entirely. Concern. She checked her watch. Still time before the next round of walks. She hesitated, then clipped the leash tighter. "All right," she said quietly. "We'll go back." She gave a gentle tug. The pup didn't resist. But he didn't come easily either. He stood then paused. Turned his head back once. Just once. As if memorizing the place. They walked away, the corridor slowly brightening again as they returned toward the main area. Her steps felt heavier. She couldn't shake the image of him sitting there, calm, unmoving, certain. Back in the open space, the shelter noise wrapped around them again. Bowls. Footsteps. Voices. Normal. She unclipped the leash and guided him into a quiet pen near the office. He settled immediately. Too immediately. Curled up neatly. Head on pause. But his eyes stayed open. Tracking. Every sound. A coworker passed by and smiled. New guys adjusting fast. "Yeah," she said. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. She finished her tasks mechanically. Paperwork. Schedules. Cleaning. Yet her mind kept drifting back to that door. The way the pup had blocked her. The way he had waited. An hour passed. Then two. Late afternoon light shifted, growing softer, lower. She tried to ignore it. Tried to tell herself it was coincidence. Dogs were sensitive. Shelters were stressful. But when she glanced back toward the pen, the pup was sitting up. Ears forward. Body angled toward the same corridor. Even from here. Her stomach tightened. He stood as she approached, tail wagging once, polite, hopeful. "You again," she murmured. She clipped the leash on without thinking. They walked. This time she didn't resist the pull. Didn't question the direction. They reached the corridor. The light felt dimmer than before. The air cooler. The pup's steps slowed at the exact same spot. Same tile. Same silence. He stopped. Saturday. Waited. A soft whine vibrated in his chest. Her heart pounded. "Someone's probably just working back there," she whispered. But the words rang hollow. She leaned closer to the door. Held her breath. And then, there it was. So faint she almost dismissed it. A sound. Not a voice. Not a cry. Just a shallow, uneven breath. Her blood went cold. She straightened slowly. The pup didn't move. Didn't bark. Didn't panic. He simply stayed seated, ears forward, listening. Certain. And in that moment, she understood something she couldn't quite explain yet. This wasn't anxiety. This wasn't fear. This was a dog doing exactly what he was meant to do. Finding what others had missed. Waiting for someone to finally listen. She reached for her radio. Her hand trembled. "Can someone come to the east corridor?" she said quietly. I think we need to check something." The pup's tail wagged once. Slow. Hopeful. And he stayed right where he was. Footsteps echoed before anyone appeared. Soft at first. Then closer. She stood beside the door, radio still warm in her hand. The pup remained seated at her feet. Posture tall, ears forward. Still listening. A coworker rounded the corner, brows slightly raised. "Everything okay?" She hesitated. Words felt clumsy now. "I think there's someone back here," she said. "Or something." The coworker glanced at the door. At the quiet corridor. Then down at the dog. He smiled gently. "New pups probably picking up shelter noise," he said. "They do that. Echoes travel weird in these halls." She nodded, even as her stomach tightened. "That's what I thought too," she said. Another staff member joined them. Then another. The corridor felt smaller with people in it. Brighter. Louder. The pup shifted. Not backward. Not away. He stood. Moved half a step closer to the door. A low sound pressed out of his chest. Not a whine this time. Something quieter. Almost a breath held too long. One of them crouched. "Hey buddy," she said kindly. "You're all right." She reached out, rubbing the pup's shoulder. His muscles were relaxed. His tail neutral. But his attention never broke. "He's not scared," she said softly. "He's focused." They exchanged looks. Someone chuckled under their breath. "Dogs fixate sometimes," another said. "Especially new ones. New smells." She felt heat creep up her neck. Maybe she was overthinking it. Long shifts did that. Quiet hours played tricks on perception. She stepped closer to the door again. The pup immediately stepped sideways, blocking her. Not forceful. Just present. She stopped. A few of them noticed now. "That's interesting," someone murmured. The pup looked up at her briefly, then back to the door, as if to say not yet. Her heart thudded. Still, no one else heard anything. No sound. No movement. The corridor seemed perfectly still. Someone tapped the door lightly with their knuckles. "Maintenance," they called. Nothing. They waited. Counted seconds in silence. Finally, the moment dissolved. "Well," the first coworker said, standing. "We can log it. Maintenance can check tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word felt heavy. She looked down at the pup. His ears flicked. He sat again, waiting. "I don't think he's wrong," she said quietly. No one dismissed her outright. But no one agreed either. They were tired. It was late afternoon. Nothing obvious demanded urgency. "Let's walk him," someone suggested gently. "Give him a break." She nodded. Reluctantly. She clipped the leash tighter this time. The pup rose easily. But as they turned away, he stopped, looked back. His body leaned toward the door like a magnet pulling metal. She felt it then. That ache behind the ribs. The one that came when something mattered and you didn't yet know why. She tugged again, apologetic. "I know," she whispered. The pup followed. Slowly. Back in the main area, the shelter noise wrapped around them again. Too loud now. Too busy. She led him to the outdoor run, hoping fresh air would settle him. The sky was pale blue, edged with thin clouds. A breeze stirred leaves along the fence. The pup stepped onto the grass, paused, sniffed, then turned his head toward the building, toward that corridor. He didn't pull. He didn't resist. He just watched. She sighed and leaned against the fence. "You're really sure, aren't you?" The pup sat beside her, close, not touching, but near enough that she could feel him. Minutes passed. Other dogs barked. Cars moved somewhere beyond the trees. Life went on. But the feeling didn't leave. When they went back inside, she noticed it again. The way the pup's body angled. The way his ears tracked the building, not the people. She placed him in his pen and stepped away. He lay down, curled neatly. But his eyes never closed. She tried to focus on end-of-day tasks. Cleaning. Updating charts. Answering messages. Yet her mind kept circling back. The door. The breath she thought she heard. The way the pup had blocked her. Not in fear. In choice. She checked the clock. Another hour passed. Light shifted again, turning warmer, softer. She walked past his pen. He stood instantly. Tail wagged once. Hopeful. "You want another walk?" she asked. The pup's ears lifted. But his gaze slid past her. Toward the corridor. She exhaled. "All right," she said. "One more." They walked. No hesitation now. No doubt. As they approached the spot, her pulse quickened. The pup slowed. Saturday. Waited. Same place. Same posture. Same quiet insistence. She held her breath. Pressed her ear closer to the door. Nothing. She almost laughed. Almost turned away. Then the pup shifted. His ears flicked. His nose lifted. And there it was again. That sound. Barely there. A shallow intake of air. Then a pause. Then another. Her skin prickled. She straightened slowly. "This isn't nothing," she whispered. The pup's tail gave a small steady wag. Not excitement. Relief. She reached for her radio again. This time she didn't hesitate. I need someone back here, she said firmly. Now. The corridor seemed to hold its breath. The pup remained seated, watching the door, waiting, certain that this time, they would listen. They came faster this time. Footsteps hurried down the corridor. Voices followed, low, confused, alert. She stood planted beside the door, one hand resting lightly on the pup's back. His fur was warm under her palm. Steady. Okay, someone said, catching their breath. What's going on? She didn't answer right away. She was listening. So was the dog. The hallway felt different now. Quieter. Heavier. The pup's ears tipped forward, then flattened slightly. Not fear, focus. There, she whispered. Do you hear that? They all went still. Seconds passed. 10. 15. Nothing. One of them exhaled. I don't hear. Then it happened again. So faint it barely registered. A breath. Uneven. Strained. She felt her stomach drop. I heard it, someone said softly. The pup's tail gave one slow wag. That was all. No barking. No lunging. Just confirmation. Someone reached for the door handle. The pup stood instantly. Not blocking this time. Standing beside it. Ready. The door opened with a quiet scrape. Cool air slipped out. Dust. Old concrete. The room beyond was dim, cluttered with stacked supplies and unused equipment. Shadows filled the corners. They stepped inside slowly. The pup followed, leash loose, nose low, now tracking. His movements changed. Careful. Precise. He led them past boxes and shelves toward the far wall. She noticed it then. A narrow space behind a row of old cabinets. Dark. Still. The pup stopped. Saturday. Stared. They moved the cabinet. Just enough. And then they saw it. Person. Curled on the floor. Unmoving. For a moment no one spoke. Time stretched. Oh my God. Someone breathed. She dropped to her knees, heart pounding. The person was young. Pale. Eyes closed. Breathing. Barely. Alive. The pup remained seated. Watching. Guarding. Someone called emergency services. Another grabbed blankets. She stayed where she was, one hand resting on the pup's shoulder. You did this, she whispered. You found them. The pup leaned into her touch, calm as ever. Paramedics arrived quickly, their voices steady, practiced. They assessed. They stabilized. The person's chest rose a little stronger now. Relief washed through her in waves. As they lifted the stretcher, the pup stood and took one careful step forward, then stopped. Watched them go. The corridor slowly filled with sound again. Movement. Breath. She sank back against the wall. Hands shaking. She looked down at the dog. You wouldn't let it go, she murmured. The pup met her gaze. Tail wagged once. As if to say, that was never an option. The door was closed again. The cabinet returned. But the space felt changed. The silence no longer empty. Later, when the shelter settled again, she sat with the pup in a quiet room. He lay at her feet, finally resting. Eyes closed now. At peace. She realized something then. He hadn't been drawn by fear. Or chaos. He had been drawn by need. By a whisper too quiet for humans. But not for him. And because he had listened, someone would live. She reached down and rested her hand over his heart. Steady. Strong. Thankful. Outside, the light faded into evening. And in the shelter, one quiet dog had done what no one else could. He had waited. He had insisted. He had been heard. The shelter didn't return to normal right away. Tried to. Lights stayed on schedule. Doors opened and closed. Phones rang. But something subtle had shifted. Voices were softer. Movements slower. As if everyone was afraid to miss something again. She sat in the small staff room with a paper cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. Across from her, the pup lay stretched out on the floor, chin resting on his paws. For the first time since arriving, he slept. Deep. Unmoving. She watched the rise and fall of his chest. Steady. The image of that hidden room replayed in her mind. The cabinets. The shadows. The body curled too still. She closed her eyes briefly. If the dog hadn't stopped, if she hadn't listened, her stomach tightened. A supervisor stepped in quietly and sat across from her. "You did the right thing," he said. She nodded, though the words didn't quite land yet. "I almost didn't push it," she admitted. "I kept thinking, maybe it was nothing." He glanced down at the pup. "But it wasn't," he said. "No, it wasn't." Later that evening, the details began to surface. The person they'd found was a volunteer from a nearby program. Young. New. They'd come in earlier that day to help reorganize old storage. No one noticed when they didn't leave. No one heard them collapse behind the cabinets. Except the dog. The realization settled slowly. He hadn't just sensed distress. He'd followed a timeline humans had already missed. She knelt beside him and brushed her fingers gently along his back. "You heard them before we did," she whispered. The pup's ear twitched in his sleep. A faint sigh escaped him. She smiled despite the heaviness in her chest. When the phone rang later that night, she answered it with a quiet breath held. The hospital confirmed it. The person was stable. Dehydrated. Exhausted. But alive. "She's going to be okay," the nurse said. Her knees nearly gave out. She thanked them twice before hanging up. Then she sat on the floor beside the pup and let the relief come. Not all at once. Just enough. Her fingers curled into his fur as she leaned forward, resting her forehead briefly against his shoulder. He stirred, lifted his head, looked at her. Those deep brown eyes met hers again, calm, knowing, gentle. "You saved her," she said softly. The pup's tail thumped once against the floor. That was all. No pride. No excitement. Just acceptance. Word spread quickly after that. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet conversations between staff. Careful retellings. People paused longer at the corridor now. They listened. Maintenance checked every unused space. Protocols were reviewed. But none of it erased the simple truth everyone felt. If the dog hadn't insisted, they didn't finish the sentence. They didn't need to. That night, she stayed later than usual. The shelter emptied out until it was just her, the dogs, and the hum of lights overhead. She walked the pup one more time before closing. When they passed the corridor, he slowed. Paused. Listen. The space was silent now. Empty. Satisfied, he continued walking. Her chest loosened at the sight. "It's okay," she murmured. "You can rest." Back in his pen, he curled up easily. Comfortable. Safe. She lingered by the gate longer than she meant to. There were forms to fill out tomorrow. Decisions to make. He wouldn't be the new pup anymore. He was something else now. Something known. She reached through the bars and let her fingers rest lightly against his paw. "Thank you," she whispered. The pup shifted closer, pressing his paw gently into her hand. Outside, the world kept moving. Inside the shelter, a quiet discovery had already changed everything. Not because someone shouted, not because alarms sounded, but because one small dog listened and refused to walk away. The next morning arrived gently. Gray clouds stretched thin across the sky, letting light through without warmth. The shelter doors opened as they always did. Keys turned. Lights flickered on. Routine returned. But no one felt the same. She arrived early, coffee still steaming in her travel mug, the weight of yesterday sitting quietly in her chest. When she reached the pup's pen, he was already awake. Sitting. Watching. Tail thumped once when he saw her. "Good morning," she said softly. She clipped the leash on and opened the gate. He stepped out calmly, brushing past her leg the way he always did now. Close. Trusting. They walked the corridor together. The air felt different in daylight. Cleaner. Less heavy. When they passed the storage door, the pup slowed, then continued without stopping. No tension. No listening. Just a quiet acceptance that what needed to be found had already been found. She exhaled without realizing she'd been holding her breath. Later that morning, a call came through. The hospital again. The young woman was awake. Disoriented. Weak. But asking questions. "She keeps asking about a dog," the nurse said gently. "Says she heard breathing, thought she was imagining it." Her eyes stung. "She wasn't," she whispered after the call ended. The shelter staff gathered near the front office, exchanging looks. Someone cleared their throat. Do you think she should know? No one answered right away. The decision settled naturally. That afternoon, after careful approvals and quiet coordination, she drove to the hospital. The pup rode in the back seat, secured, calm as ever. The city passed by in muted colors. Traffic hummed. Life moved on. He watched the window, ears flicking at distant sounds, but his body stayed relaxed, as if he understood where they were going. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and warm linen. Voices echoed softly down long halls. They paused outside the room. She's still tired, the nurse said. But I think this will help. She nodded. The door opened quietly. The young woman lay propped up on pillows, skin pale but eyes alert. Confusion flickered. Then recognition. Her gaze dropped. To the dog. Her breath hitched. That's him, she whispered. The pup stopped just inside the doorway. Saturday. Tail wagged once. Slow. Careful. Her eyes filled. I thought I was dreaming, she said. I kept hearing something. Like someone waiting. She swallowed hard. You were, she said softly. He heard you. The pup stood and took a step forward, slow, cautious. He stopped a few feet from the bed. Waited. Permission. The woman reached out, her hand trembling. It's okay, she murmured. The pup closed the distance and rested his chin gently against the mattress. No jumping. No excitement. Just presence. Her fingers curled into his fur. She cried quietly. Not loudly. Not all at once. Relief moved through the room like warm air. He stayed, the woman said. He wouldn't let anyone leave. She nodded. He doesn't leave when it matters. They didn't stay long. The visit was brief by design. But when they left, something had shifted again. Not urgency this time. Closure. Back at the shelter, the pup seemed lighter. He drank water. Ate well. Curled up easily in the afternoon sun. She sat nearby, watching him breathe. You finished your job, she whispered. He opened one eye. Then closed it again. In the days that followed, the story spread beyond the shelter. Quietly. A volunteer mentioned it to a friend. A paramedic told a colleague. People began asking about the dog who listened. But the pup didn't change. He didn't perform. Didn't seek attention. He simply stayed close to her. Followed her steps. Leaned against her leg when she stopped. One evening as she locked up, she paused by his pen. You know, she said slowly. You don't have to go back to waiting. He stood. Walked over. Pressed his shoulder gently against her knee. Her chest tightened. The rescue hadn't ended in that corridor. It was still happening. Quietly. One breath at a time. And somewhere deep inside she knew. He wasn't done saving yet. Not others. But himself. Together with her. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly in ordinary moments. Morning routines softened. Evenings stretched longer. The shelter learned a new rhythm around them. The pup began to change in small ways first. He slept deeper. Dreamed, paws twitching, breath puffing softly through his nose. He started greeting other dogs with gentle curiosity instead of constant watchfulness. A sniff. A pause. A calm step back. She noticed how his shoulders no longer stayed tight. How his tail rested easier against his legs. As if some weight he'd been carrying, unseen, unspoken, had finally been set down. She changed too. She lingered more. Sat on the floor instead of standing over clipboards. Let silence stay instead of filling it with motion. Sometimes she'd sit beside his pen during breaks, back against the wall, listening to the shelter breathe. Ventilation humming. Distant traffic. A dog sighing in sleep. The pup would lie close to the gate, eyes half-lidded. Always near. One afternoon, rain came without warning. Heavy drops drummed against the roof, steady and rhythmic. The shelter dimmed, shadows pooling in corners. She clipped the leash on and took him outside anyway. They stood under the overhang, watching rain streak the pavement. The pup tilted his head, ears flicking at the sound. It's loud today, she murmured. He leaned gently into her leg, not asking for comfort, offering it. She rested her hand on his back. For the first time in days she felt her breath slow completely. The hospital sent updates occasionally. Short messages. Grateful words. The young woman was gaining strength. Walking again. Talking about the future. She says she wants to volunteer again someday. The nurse shared during one call. She smiled softly. I think she already knows what listening can do. One evening after closing, she brought a blanket into the quiet room. She sat on the floor and invited the pup closer. He hesitated only a second, then curled beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. She didn't move, didn't speak. The shelter lights hummed overhead, warm and steady. She realized then how much he had been holding himself together. Waiting, watching, listening, without ever being asked to rest. You don't have to listen anymore, she whispered. I will. The pup exhaled deeply, a full-body sigh. His head rested against her thigh. Her chest tightened, not with fear this time but with something like gratitude. Days passed. Then weeks. Applications came in. Families walked through the aisles again, voices hopeful, curious. The pup watched them calmly. Not withdrawn. Not eager. Just observant. One afternoon, a couple paused near his pen. They crouched. Smiled. The pup glanced at them, then back at her. She felt it. That quiet question. She knelt and rested her hand on his collar. It's okay, she said softly. Whatever you choose. The pup stood. Walked forward. Then stopped. Looked back at her once more. Her throat tightened. He wasn't leaving. Not yet. The couple moved on, understanding without explanation. She stayed kneeling long after they were gone. Healing wasn't about letting go quickly. It was about knowing when to stay. That night, as she turned off the lights, the shelter fell into familiar silence. She paused by his pen. You're safe here, she said. The pup curled up, eyes closing easily. For the first time, he didn't watch the corridors. Didn't listen for whispers. He slept. And in that sleep, something gentle took root. Not vigilance. Not duty. But trust. Two beings mending quietly. Side by side. The story stayed with the shelter. Not as something dramatic, but as something remembered. People spoke about it in lowered voices. Between tasks. While refilling bowls. While locking doors at night. They didn't embellish it. They didn't need to. A dog had listened. Person had lived. That was enough. Weeks passed. Autumn crept in slowly, softening the air, cooling the mornings. Leaves gathered along the fence outside, rustling when the wind passed through. The pup had a name now. Came naturally. No meeting. No debate. They called him Whisper, because that was how it had happened. Not loudly. Not urgently. Just quietly enough to matter. She still walked him every day. Some mornings were busy, filled with laughter and questions from families. Other afternoons were still, bathed in long shadows and calm. Whisper walked beside her without pulling, without lagging, present. When they passed the old corridor, he glanced toward it only once, then kept going. His job there was done. One evening, as the shelter settled into its familiar hush, she sat on the floor beside him again, back against the wall, knees pulled in. Whisper lay stretched along her side, breathing slow and even. You changed things, she murmured. He didn't lift his head. Didn't need to. She smiled softly. So many people thought courage was loud, that it announced itself. But she knew better now. Courage could be quiet. It could look like sitting still when everyone else walked past. Like refusing to move without ever making a scene. A letter arrived one afternoon. Handwritten. She recognized the name immediately. The young woman from the hospital. The writing was uneven but careful. She wrote about recovery. About learning to trust her body again. About how she still remembered the sound. Not of panic but of presence. I wasn't alone, the letter said. Even before I knew anyone was coming. Her hands trembled as she folded the page. She didn't read it aloud. She didn't need to. She rested the letter on the floor beside Whisper. He lifted his head, sniffed it gently, then lay back down, as if he understood exactly what it meant. Adoption day came quietly too. No balloons. No announcements. Just a couple who lingered longer than most. They didn't rush. Didn't talk loudly. They sat on the floor. Waited. Whisper approached on his own. Sniffed their hands. Paused. then sat between them. She felt the moment settle before she allowed herself to breathe. This time when he looked back at her, there was no question, only peace. She knelt and rested her forehead briefly against his. "You listen well," she whispered. "They'll listen too." The goodbye wasn't sharp. It was warm, the kind that leaves space instead of ache. Weeks later she received a photo. Whisper asleep on a living room rug. Sunlight across his back. Quiet home. She smiled and placed the photo on the bulletin board by her desk. Life continued. New dogs arrived. New routines formed. But something had changed, not visibly, not dramatically. People paused more. Listened longer. Paid attention when a dog stopped or sat, or refused to move. They trusted what they couldn't always explain. Because once a whisper had been enough. And somewhere out there, a dog who once listened so carefully was finally resting. And somewhere else, a person who once went unheard was living fully again. All because one small moment was not ignored. All because someone chose to stop and listen.